Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's like he literally told me, and like, I look back at it now, how, how much, how meaningful it was. And, at the time I didn't, think about it. I mean, I'm 12 years old. He buys me a hot dog cart and he's like, hey, this is going to pay for your college or be your college.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure. Sure, Dad. It's just one of them little comments that he makes that, like, at the time is not very meaningful. It's not meaningless. It's not very meaningful. Now I look back at it and it had tremendous meaning.
Welcome to the Built to Rent podcast, where we cover all things rentals, all things recurring revenue, and in some cases, all things passive income, although not all of the businesses that we'll be covering will be passive. So I just wanted to get that out there. And this episode is brought to you in part by our good friends over at NPSA, or National Portable Storage Association. They're a nonprofit organization, npsa.org, but they're specifically dedicated to the portable storage industry, which makes them really unique. So all of the resources, legal, membership directory, anything in and around portable storage, if you're looking to start or grow your portable storage business, NPSA is the place that you go. I'll also say this, the team over there is pretty awesome. And long before they were partners on the podcast, we were actually customers of theirs, and we found out about it through the national conference. And this next conference in 2025 is going to be in none other than Las Vegas at the Paris Hotel, April 6th through the 8th. So if you're looking to start your business, if you're looking to grow your business, if you have anything to do with the portable storage industry, you want to be in Las Vegas from April 6th through the 8th. They continue to up the ante every year, and I'm sure next year is going to be absolutely amazing. I'll be there. I hope to see you there. Hope you enjoy the show. The story I was going to tell you, we were just talking before we went live, is, I don't know if you remember this, but it came back to me through Caitlin or someone on my team, that at the last NPSA networking session, the speaker or whoever was on stage at the time says, by show of hands, raise your hand if you knew you were going to be in the portable storage industry. And nobody's hand is up. You start looking around the room, no one's hand is up, but there's one person who has his hand up, and it was yours. So, you've sort of been born and bred and have really grown up with the shipping container portable storage industry. So I think you've got a super unique vantage point, and you've effectively seen everything and have built a really successful brand. So I guess off the bat, congrats to you, and really looking forward to diving in.
Thank you, Donald. It was very, very funny. I do remember that meeting quite well, and everybody else is like, yeah, they started here. They, were in college for this. They did that, and like you said, I mean, I was a year old when my dad bought his first container. So I mean, I literally just grew along with the business, and our business started in many different avenues. I mean, my grandfather was a farmer, and my dad was in a variety of different businesses, and didn't really have a projection that, like, hey, we were going to be, our mainstay was going to be a shipping container, or mainstay was going to be a storage container, back in the, 80s when my dad, was doing things. But, fast forward a couple of decades, and it really grew on us. And, my dad and I grew up, working together with it, and, realizing that there was a potential in the business. I mean, back in the 90s, it wasn't even really, there was a question, I guess, is this business sustainable? And, can we make is it full time? Can we, make a living out of it? And, fast forward a couple of decades, and it's, again, it keeps evolving, every year as we go here.
I'll say, I'm not sure if anyone gave you this, but, Jesus was born in a manger. Joe was born in a shipping container. That's what you should go with. I know you were one technically when he bought the first shipping container, so let's not let details get in the way of a good story, but that's what you should tell folks. So maybe let's start to unpack that a bit. So your father was a farmer. It sounds like at some point kind of entrepreneurship was really sort of bred and within the family. Before we get into the shipping container side, can you maybe unpack sort of your dad and his father and sort of how you guys grew up in New York?
Yeah, so my grandfather was a farmer. My dad was not a farmer. My dad was an entrepreneur. So he liked the hustle and bustle of the business world, and that he had no interest in being a farmer. But my dad, or my grandpa, farming and that, had a small farm, and had a backhoe and a dump truck, and got in a track trailer, back in the 60s and that. And, we're, old school business with old Mack trucks and that. And, small truck and, just a couple little trucks here, doing things and, hauling what you could do to make money and having a backhoe to dig holes and, do jobs that, the backhoes weren't really that prevalent back then. And my dad just, grew up and, knew he wanted to be a millionaire. That's one story he told me years ago. He didn't know how or what, but he, that was his vision in that. So, and he wasn't scared to try different things and, work on different things. And I tell a lot of stories with my kids that, back in the 70s, back in the 80s, there wasn't any internet, there wasn't any Google. So you couldn't, to get a product, to find something, you had to know somebody. And my dad had a world of connections of knowing people. I mean, he never met a stranger.
And was that just his personality? I want to be a millionaire. Dad's a farmer. That's not the life that I want to necessarily lead. So it sounds like he was sort of always getting after it and trying to figure out sort of the next hustle. But to your point, internet doesn't exist. So sort of what was the early family business for the Verdis back then?
Yep. So, in the 70s, my dad and grandpa bought the original location where we're at. And my grandpa had come off of like a 10-acre farmette, and our current location's 100 acres. And, there was a cow barn and farmland. And my grandpa had a vision of being a farmer, and put cows in a barn. So in 72, they bought the place together. My dad moved onto the property, lived in the old farmhouse. And then they put cows in a barn, and they started building. They built a 40 by 80 shop, the original shop that was on the property and that. So, and then my dad's vision was to have a mobile home park. So he wanted to, have a mobile home park, and he got to 4 units, and after 4, the state requires you to have a whole bunch of different things. So he got to 4 and kind of paused, and things happened, and we kind of stopped there.
So he's got 4 mobile home units. And how old are you at this point when he's sort of reaching the limits of what the state will at least accept until he has to go and get a lot more, go through a lot more red tape to get to that point? How old were you, and sort of had it dawned on you at that point what your dad was doing, and kind of did you ever see yourself maybe walking in his shoes or kind of also being in the family business?
So no. So I was born in 77. So I wasn't even a thought yet. So there again, the major or whatever, the manger. So,
Yeah.
And then my dad and grandpa had just built, the new shop or whatever they call it, the original shop that we're in. And, my grandpa passed away at a young age of 65 with a massive heart attack. So it was a kind of a sudden, he was in a dump truck, no forewarning, no nothing in that. So my dad was kind of, my dad
So
had
he
a
was
lot
actually driving when he had the heart attack.
yes.
Wow. Very unfortunate.
So my dad was awestruck. It was you just kind of take the wind out of your sails. Your life plan. So like I
Yeah.
said, there was cows in a barn, there was trucks on a road, there was 4 mobile home sites. He had plans and visions, and it just all that gets a life-changing event like that suddenly really takes the wind out of your sails. So I was just born. I had no idea what was going on. And my dad, just kind of put his nose to the grindstone and, just figured he's got to get through this or whatever. So, he rented the shop out, and the cows all went to auction. He leased out the land for farming. He had a couple mobile home sites there. He was leasing them out.
And is that just because he didn't see himself in the farming business? So he said, although dad had it, your granddad,
Yep.
I don't necessarily see myself long term as a farmer. So I'll utilize the land in some other way, but let me at least sell at least the animals that are in the barn.
Absolutely. Yep. He just,
Got
it wasn't his passion. It wasn't his dream in that. So he figured, the best thing to do is to, send them to auction and, lease out the land and, let somebody else use it to its most advantage.
So he gets rid of the animals, sells the animals. And at that point, what's next for him? What is he thinking is the next step for him?
Yeah, so at that time we were doing some home site development, driveways and septic tank installation. We were doing septic tank pumping, repairs, new installations, driveways, And we had a real good friend that was also doing the well drilling. So my dad leased out the shop area because his business was larger at the time. So he leased out the business or the shop to this well drilling business, and he occupied that and covered the bills. And he was actually doing some transportation, and the gentleman that was doing the well drilling had some European and some drilling bits and drilling machines that were of a higher technology at the time and that. So my dad had went down to the port to pick up the one of the drilling bits for him, and that's where he ran into a guy and found a container and bought the first container for himself so he could use it to keep his tools and keep his stuff locked up, so when he rented the shop out, he had his separate space for all his tools and equipment.
So almost quite literally stumbled into it. He's going to the port in order to pick up bits for a European partner. And he needed some space because he was renting out the shop that you guys had on the land, and just says, hey man, I need some extra space. I'll go and buy a container because I need to store some of my tools for my main business. So at this point, he's still leaning into the main business, which was, you said, is it like repaving roads or effectively construction work at a high level?
Yes, small construction. Back in the '70s in our area, mobile homes were of the affordable home of the segment. So rural lots, either, and that's where the vision of a mobile home park came from. My dad was at the time they were subdividing off half-acre lots or acre lots and selling them for a single wide or double wide mobile home and putting new home sites in. And also there was a handful, a bunch of mobile home parks being developed. And like I said, that was an affordable housing plan that was going. So he was very active in putting in, driveways and wells and dug wells.
Driveways, roads.
The small roads. I mean, not paving interstates by any means, whatever, but just
municipalities, totally
small site development.
So he picks up this container, brings it back, starts storing his tools in. And was it a hit instantly, or did it still take some time? Probably still not necessarily. Maybe containers could be our.
No, absolutely not. So I mean, he brought it back 6 months. It sits in the yard. He's got the well drillers in our shop. He's getting the rent from the shop, and that container's locking his stuff up. Another good friend, neighbor of ours, is in the radio business, the two-way radio business. Back then, it wasn't cell towers, but it was two-way communications, and they had these towers. And the kids, he had always had the technology equipment, the IT equipment in wooden sheds at the base of the tower. Well, the towers were remote sites, and the kids would always be there, partying or drinking, and they would end up, smashing a hole through the wooden shed, or the worst case would happen is they would, light it on fire and burn it down, and he'd lose all his equipment. So
again, no internet. So this is what the kids are doing for fun these days. Yep. So we got to entertain ourselves some way. There's no TikTok, there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram. All right, we're burning down shit.
We'll burn the shed down. Nobody will see it. The fire department won't be here for a while. We'll watch this happen. So
yeah, that sounds like fun, actually.
That's some country living at its best right there. So he shows up. So he stops by, 6 months later after my dad's using this container, and talk to my dad about it, and like it's not wood, it won't burn, like it's secure. They can't smash a hole in it with a hammer. He's like, hey, I want to get one of these for my tower. And he's like, can I buy this? And my dad's like, I'm using this one. I can't sell you this one. But the old adage, I know a guy. Like I know, there again before Amazon. Like, I know where to get this. So my dad said, hey, here's what it costs. I'll get you one. So then my dad goes back down to the port, and he hauled down with the truck himself. Whatever, got down to port, got chatting with the gentleman down there. And, instead of just buying the one to sell to our neighbor there, Terry, he gets talking with him, and he ends up buying like half a dozen of them. So, he brings one back and sells it to our neighbor, Terry, for the communication tower. And then he's like, well, if he wants to buy one, I'm sure there's other people who want to buy one, So my dad, ends up bringing the other, 5 back up here and puts a for sale sign on it, and starts promoting it. And back in the early days, we didn't have a good way to transport it. I mean, today's world, there's transportation systems, a magnitude of, landau trailers and tilt beds and pickups and wheel kits that go on them, and little mules that haul them around, and there's all kinds of stuff. Where back then it was a very difficult situation to try to move stuff. So it was really an all day job and 2 or 3 trucks and that kind of stuff.
So how's your dad even paying for this stuff? I know he's an entrepreneur, and I'm sure he, loans and hustled, but and it's completely different sort of stage that the world is in right now. Obviously, knowing a guy is just the internet. You sort of just go to Google for that thing, but it sounds like he was crossing all types of hurdles, largely sort of based on the fact that he had an amazing network. It sounds like he was a guy who could sort of walk out, as you mentioned, never met someone that he didn't know, and was willing and loquacious and willing to talk to anyone. But how's he funding sort of, all right, I'll go and buy 6 versus just buying the one that I know Terry needs for the light tower?
So, he was already, he was already entrepreneur. So, I mean, he was, we already had, he had cash flow, I mean, so, buying that first group was, basically out of cash flow. And he
Yeah.
was, I, there again, everybody's risk tolerance is different, right? So he
Yeah.
was entrepreneur by true and true, and so like he had his educated risks that he was willing to take and and be able to do, and over the years, that first 6, like he was able to fund that himself. We've had troubles over the years, though. I mean, in the '90s, the banks didn't really look at this as a business, I mean, so, trying to finance and try to grow the business over the years, we've had a lot of hurdles where we've had to, double down on, loans or mortgages on real estate or on, other like trucks and equipment that we have, because the, banks back then they didn't understand, they didn't loan, based on that. And it's still at that point, it wasn't really a business model where they could say, if we were going to open up a restaurant or a car dealership, they had a model where they could, they could say, hey, look, that was successful in this, plug it in, it's an MSA, this many people and that. And they didn't have that for, the storage business back then, or the container business.
Yeah, I'd love to unpack that, and so we'll come back to that in a second. I think we should definitely sort of double click on some of those challenges. I think everyone probably sees what you guys have built and says, "Oh yeah, they were always that big," but it sounds like it wasn't always that easy. Maybe before we jump there, your dad. All right, he's got 6 containers. He bought 6 back. He's still got the one that he's running the tools out of. He sold one to neighbor Terry, and he put a for sale sign up for the other ones. And again, it sounds like he still had sort of the main business, which was supporting the mobile home and sort of affordable housing. At that point, is he, all right, I'm all in on shipping containers, or is this still a side hustle at that point? Still a side hustle.
Still side hustle. So so my, back then, like, so the other thing that we had, the affordable housing, and we also had trucking. We were also doing, some transportation, and we were also doing the septic tank pumping and installation and repairs and that. So, one of my dad's best tributes is, always taught me to be a lifelong learner. It just, he always was learning how to do things, and it was never a task that he was afraid of, as far as, gaining knowledge and figuring something out. So, go through the '80s and that, the containers was still just, just a side hustle. I mean, and the markets were changing, as far as like whether, typically we're, in the beginning we were just only selling them. It wasn't until the mid '80s when the rental, my dad went out west, and there again, through a connection through somebody, and we bought our first tilt bed trailer. And that really was a game changer in '84 when we, when he bought the trailer and, had a tilt bed trailer that you could, deliver and pick up in one machine or one process, and be able to do that. And that really made it so that the rental side of it was an available option.
So it sounds like the mid '80s is when things really started to take off, and you're a young boy. You guys had a few trailers, a few containers under your belt at that point. In the back of your mind, I'm sure you're watching your dad sort of grow and scale this business. And I also sort of find it with my kids, because I'm an entrepreneur, it's something that always sort of feels attainable to them. Were you at that point saying, all right, well, that's cool, dad's got his thing, but sort of like your dad, well, my dad's a farmer, I don't want to be a farmer. Were you sort of looking at your dad in the same sense to say, well, that's his business, but I'm going to go sort of down this other path?
So as a younger man, I mean, I was always on a job site. So we were on, I grew up on a dozer, on a backhoe, on an excavator. We were doing site work, plumbing, doing, and I really gathered a lot of experience and knowledge. I remember every morning every morning we'd be on a different job at a different person's house. So, back when I was 8, 10 years old, 12 years old, we were basically in somebody's house, in somebody's backyard, putting in a septic tank and installation, doing a repair, maintenance. And, it really gained me a lot of knowledge of like you meeting people. And like, there's a certain level of like when you meet somebody, it's one thing to meet somebody in their, in a public setting or in a restaurant or like even in their business. But like when you're at their house, like you really get like a whole new mindset of like how people live. And we're climbing in the basement, we're in the backyard. I don't want to say we're intimate, but we're, you're kind of intimate. And you're seeing how people live, their lifestyle, and you're also, the home service business. We still do septic tank pumping today. There's a certain level of expectation. It's one thing when you show up at a store and you shop there, you have a certain persona, you go get your cup of coffee. But in the home service world, like, there's a hat that you have to wear, a feeling that you have to wear. You have to a level of respect that you have to give when you're, working in somebody's home. You take off your shoes or you put booties on when you walk across their living room, going in their basement, trying to find something, you're trying to work and their basement's cluttered full of their basement stuff, right? It's like,
Let's go work for basement stuff. Yeah, my mom's got a lot of basement stuff for sure.
It could be cobwebs, could be Christmas decorations.
Yep. You guys are still in the septic work, but you got the tilt bed, and it sounds like that's sort of when the business started to take off. So it doesn't sound like you guys ever dropped any of sort of the local septic work, but when did sort of shipping containers and that as the primary business really start to take off to say, all right, this is going to be the focus of Verdi and kind of what we'll be known for?
Yeah, so I guess so there's probably a pendulum swing like we're saying about. So, the septic and the trucking and the different things and, versus the storage container. It was like 85 to 95 was that swing that happened. So in 85, it was the mainstay was the other stuff. And then by 95, it was like, hey, this container thing is, working, it's taking off, we're doing good for it. There's a demand. How do we supply that demand? How do we, build the business up? And if we back up a little bit, I was a young man and my dad bought me a hot dog cart, and he set me up. It was an old Pepsi trailer. He's dropped me off at a corner, an intersection of the road, and cook hot dogs and sell soda pop or whatever. And then I worked on getting in different fairs and festivals with it so that I could get more volume and get more business. So like that's always been my concept or whatever is like how do you grow this? How do you do more with it? How do you do better?
That was your university degree.
He bought me that. What's that?
No, I was saying that's sort of your university degree. That's your college there. Sort of buying you a hot dog cart and kind of letting you grow the business. I can't think of any better way to sort of cut your teeth as an entrepreneur, coming from an entrepreneur, because I'm sure he's looking around the corner. He knows everything that you'll have to figure out, but sort of just giving it to you and kind of letting you figure it out and talk to people and figure out how to get into additional events seems sort of priceless.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like he literally told me, and like, I look back at it now, how meaningful it was. And, at the time I didn't, think about it. I'm 12 years old. He buys me a hot dog cart and he's like, hey, this is going to pay for your college or be your college.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure. Sure, Dad. It's just one of them little comments that he makes that like, at the time is not very meaningful. It's not meaningless. It's not very meaningful. Now I look back at it and it had tremendous meaning.
Yeah, I'll have to bookmark those. I say all these things to my kids. I'm like, they're not listening. And then sort of every now and then I'll hear them repeat something I said to them or was beating over their head to one of their friends or one of their siblings. I say, all right, they are listening. They may not act like it at the time. So that's pretty awesome. So really sort of 85, 95, business starts to scale. But it sounds like you guys hit a point where you're kind of growing beyond what cash flow or margins will support. And now you're saying, let's put a little gasoline on it. Let's go out to the bank and let's see if we can grow sort of this even faster. But it sounds like you guys hit some headwinds when you tried to sort of reach your hand out to the local organizations to infuse some cash into the business.
Absolutely. We'd always worked with, local banks at the time, there again, it was, early 90s. My dad's, bankers were farmer friends, they were, the farm community, the rural community and that. And there again, if you want to go plant, 100 acres of crops, they understood that model,
Right.
right? I mean, we're going to front load you money for in the spring for seed. You're going to put fertilizer down. You're going to buy fuel. You're going to harvest in the fall. That's the turn cycle. We understand it.
We got it.
Even in construction business, like they understood that. But like when we said, hey, look, we want to go buy, a couple dozen containers. They just like, oh, okay, like
I don't get it.
how, like, I don't get it. Like, what are you going to do with it? You're going to sell it. You're going to rent it.
There's no market for it. Yeah,
like,
of course. At that point, they're thinking there's
no
not a market
for it.
Yep.
And there's no title. Like, where's the, like, they're thinking about it like a truck, like, hey, can we have the title? Like, oh, there's not a title. Like,
Doesn't work that way.
Okay. Like, how do I put a lien on it?
Yeah.
So, there was, definitely challenges. And then, like I said, they couldn't understand the concept. It's like, well, we'd, buy a dozen containers and then like, all right, we're going to rent them. We're going to sell them. Like whoever comes in the door, we're going to do it. And they're like, that's not a business model.
Right.
So
what you guys do? I mean, at that point, it sounds like you're growing faster than your wallet will support. Did you guys just hunker down and try to find out how to sell more, how to rent more, go into debt? How'd you sort of finance that next level of growth for A-Verdi?
Yep. So, a couple or all the above, I mean, we hunkered down, put every bit of cash flow that we had back into it. We did have some equity in some of our real estate, and, some of our rolling stock, some of our trucks and that. So, we utilized that as collateral to finance the bank. I mean, the bank understood that, you've got a, 2000X, truck and it's, this kind of value, put a lien onto that, remortgage a property. It's like, hey, look at, we've got, 50,000 or whatever dollar amount you got the collateral on the property. It's like, okay, we can do a traditional mortgage refinance on that.
Wow.
So we utilize, I guess more traditional type, loan or borrowing ideals to, fund it, because there was no way to just fund it, on the container side or on the storage side of it.
But I think that's pretty unique, right? I mean, I'd love to know how your mom felt about all of this, but I just sort of put myself in those shoes. I didn't grow up an entrepreneur. I don't know that anyone sort of in my family would have seen, yep, all right, we want to grow this business, so we'll get a lien out or, take a second mortgage out on a home, leverage some of our existing assets in order to move cash into a growing business. Of course now, but I think it's a pretty good point there just to sort of double click on that. Anytime you're looking for sort of growth in the business, you'll hit a speed bump or you'll hit some obstacles. I think most people have the opportunity to, all right, let's pack it in. I'll just sort of plateau where the business is and keep things where they are. But I think sort of true entrepreneurs will say, I'll figure it out. I'll double down. And your concept of risk is sort of reset to say, hey, if this is my plan A, I'm going to find a way to make it work. And it sounds like you guys sort of moved heaven and earth in order to make that happen. And I imagine as a young man at this point, sort of seeing everything that your father's doing to make this business successful had to have a pretty tremendous impact on your psyche and sort of how you thought about growing and scaling a business.
Like along with that, so, we talk about like the 80s, into the 90s, my dad wasn't just working on, the container business and that, wasn't just working on the septic business or the trucking side of stuff. Through them years, my dad had got his auto dealer license. So he was a, what you call a car jockey.
Yeah, he had 10 jobs.
There wasn't, an internet. There wasn't a Kelly Blue. The Kelly Blue Book was actually a book.
Right.
The NADA value guide was actually like a little yellow pocket thing that you would carry to the auction when you're buying cars, and you'd look it up or whatever and reference it and that, So, there again, like he had done that. Like he'd got into real estate. Like he had, working on getting his broker's license for, selling real estate. Along with that, because there again, it wasn't just like, hey, we're primary focused on the storage side of stuff. I mean, at the time he had a parcel of land that he bought from a farmer, and he subdivided that into lots, and sold them off. They're again kind of along with the affordable housing side of stuff. So he had done that, and working on building that tract of land up to sell that off and buy another tract of land and sell that to somebody. So he was truly involved in a bunch of different things, and always looking for the next opportunity of how to hustle a dollar. And back then there was, I look at it today, it's harder and it's easier in some aspects of things today. Back then, you could make a few dollars because there again, it was pre-internet. You could buy something, you could sell something. Who knew about it? And there was opportunities there. Now, like it's so much more transparent, and you can Google search things and find things. But then on the same token, like, having the connections and having the whereabouts, and today's world, you gotta really like almost work on something and be able to scale it. It's kind of hard to like dabble in something, because it kind of becomes not worth the time or the effort to just have a little something that you do to make X amount a year or whatever.
Totally, totally. So let's talk about that a bit. I mean, you mentioned that the barriers to entry are so low. I guess how old were you when you took over the business? And just sort of to fast forward, when did that sort of handover happen between sort of your dad growing, all right, here's my baby, here's the business. All right, Joe, you're the chosen one. We're going to hand the business off to you. How old were you at that point, and how did that feel?
Well, I guess we got to back up a little bit. So, 90s, I graduated high school and was working in business. Didn't go to college. My hot dog stand was my college of hard knocks, and that actually had kind of got me into the sign business.
Oh, so you
So
went
we were doing.
you went from, didn't go to college, but you actually didn't just go straight into the family business. You went to a different business.
Correct.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, my dad was always a technology, person. Always had technology. Always, I mean, we had computers, back in the '80s in our office. I mean, he was, printing off reports and doing stuff, and had computers, keeping track of, inventory and different things, long before it was kind of mainstream in that. So, we had an IT person, and when I was running the food truck and that, I had needed some lettering and some price menu items and that. So I came home from high school one day, and I'd actually went to our IT's office at one point and cut up some letters and did some vinyl letter cutting with them. And I come home like 2 months later, and one of them vinyl cutters is sitting in our office, and I remember my dad looking at me. I'm like, "What's that?" And I knew what it was, but I was like, "Well, I'm like, why is that here?" Kind of question, And he's like, "Well, you need that for your menu to make make your signs and make your prices, and you need to be able to do that." I'm like, "All right," but I'm like, "Who's gonna run it?"
Right.
And he's like, "You are." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know how to run it." And there again, one of the moments, he's like, "You'll figure it out."
Nice.
And he kind of like subtly just like, he didn't tell me I had to figure it out, but he kind of dumped it on me that like I had to figure it out, and it's like in a very subtle way. So, and that inspired me, and actually ended up selling the food truck and just doing the sign business. And that was the business that I ran through the '90s. And it was a real good thing, alongside, my dad or whatever. So my dad didn't know how to do the signs. It wasn't his, it was something completely separate
That's
for
cool.
me and him to work at.
And it sounded like something you could call your own, something that you grew from the ground up that was completely on your own, after selling the food truck.
Yep, absolutely, and I think that's instrumental. I mean, because if my dad and I had worked side by side in the trucking business or septic or the storage or anything like that, we would have fought too much.
Right.
I mean, it would have, and it's hard, and there's no lesson plan, or there's no guidebook that for a family business as far as like, hey, this is definitely the right way to do it. But it's challenging to have family family business and have father and son, and then work together all day, and have the roles figured out of who president is and who vice president is and who calls a shot on that. And dad's always done it this way for so many years.
Do you have siblings as well? Like, why'd your dad choose you? It sounded like from pretty much the really, really early days, he was sort of grooming you to sort of be an entrepreneur. Now, whether or not you were going to take over the family business, I guess, was still to be determined. But it sounded like from a pretty early time period, he was sort of grooming you to sort of effectively have the skills to be able to one day take over the business.
Absolutely. So I go by the adage of you can give somebody fish and they can eat for a day, or you can teach them to fish and they can eat for a lifetime, and my dad really did that with me, so it's like, whatever the business was, whether it was storage or whether it was signs or whether it was trucking or whether it was real estate, he really, had given me the tools and the skills to be successful. So I have three younger siblings that are not involved in the business. I mean, growing up, I guess I was probably the one that was hyper involved in the business, and alongside him, all along the whole way. Unfortunately, like 2002, my dad got sick with cancer,
Mm.
and so I was a young man, and the my other siblings were all still in college and still in high school. So they weren't at a point where they were going to be, involved in the business or, ready to take over the business. And it was early in 2002. My dad, come down with cancer, or we got diagnosed with cancer in February of that year, and then he passed away in October of that year.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he was a young man. He was only 55 years old.
Wow.
So, and at the time, I was only 25 years old. So,
Wow.
I had big shoes to fill of, stepping in and, taking over a lot of stuff that, to say the least, like I wasn't ready, but he had made me ready. I mean, I didn't know I was ready at the time, but there again, he had gave me the resources to be ready.
And at any point, Joe, I'm sure you lose your grandfather. He was 65. Your dad, 55, lost a battle with cancer. I mean, in under a year, I lost my father-in-law. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in right around Thanksgiving. He was sort of gone by Christmas. And, you don't truly know how those things are going to impact you, especially when they go so fast, because you don't necessarily have time to sort of prepare. Is there any part of you that thought about maybe not taking on or carrying on the legacy of the family business and sort of doing what he did and saying like, hey, this business isn't for me. I'll stick to my sons, but maybe I'll package up the container or the portable storage business that he built and sort of move on to something else, so you didn't have those shoes to sort of fill into?
No. the he so my grandpa passed away when I was a year old, so I never got to really meet my grandpa. And there again, it was a massive heart attack. And so the year my dad got sick with cancer, he was he was always an educator, always a teacher to me all my life or whatever. But then it's almost like he went into hyperdrive, the year that he was sick, and he really, we'd always worked together side by side every day, just doing the grind. But then like, that year we sat down and he really like kind of laid out a blueprint for me, and, kind of gave me, some visionary stuff of what he had thought. And, we never, when we were working prior years before that, we never talked about a 5-year plan or 3-year
Right.
plan or 10-year plan and that. And he did that for me, and it was remarkable. And he told me, what his thoughts were and how he kind of envisioned things. But then he also gave me the ability to, adapt.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you had that time. So it's 2002. You unfortunately lose your dad, and now the business is effectively yours. How large were you guys at that time? This is, a little over 20 years ago. How big was A-Verdi at the moment?
At the time, we had probably half a dozen to a dozen full-time and part-time employees, between the different operations that we had going on. And we were involved in the septic still, and we were doing the storage side of stuff, and we had some trucks on the road.
And so this is a pretty big deal for you. I mean, you had run the food truck or the food cart. You had run the sign business, and your dad was always grooming you. And it sounds like he gave you a crash course after he got his diagnosis. But now it's all the Joe show at this point. So sort of what was your mindset about growth? Was it, I want to maintain what my dad had built?
When my dad passed away, we got married that year there. Me and my wife at the time, or now, or whatever, we'd have been together for a few years. So I had a 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old daughter. And so there was a lot of balancing to do as far as the, work life and home life, and,
Not easy.
managing, a business and, multiple employees, and, understanding what's going on there all day long, and, coming home and, having that. And I'm blessed to have a wonderful wife that, works alongside me, and she's involved in the business. And so she's got the commitment level that I do. So, it wasn't, there was probably times that I leaned in too much into work, but she didn't murder me for it. So that's a blessing.
That's awesome. That's all. Yeah, no truly successful business I found at least is sort of built without a spouse somewhere propping up or who also has their arms and sleeves rolled up. My wife sure is involved as well. How many employees do you guys have now?
Depends on what part of the business you're talking about.
But I guess to give folks an idea, you took over in 2002, call it 12 employees. And from 2002 to 2024, I mean, Joe, you guys are really, really big deal. And I'd say not just a big deal because of your size and your scale. I think it's because of the culture. And it sounds like being in the septic business and being in everyone's home, you talked about it. You walk in someone's home, you take your boots off, put booties on. You're in, people's basements with basement stuff. What is it about sort of you and how you run and the culture that you wanted to build for Verdi that has sort of helped build the brand that you guys are today?
The one part of it is we've always been customer service driven. So, I mean, we preach it, we live it, we do it every day. If the customer isn't buying, renting, ordering, whatever it might be, then we don't have a business. And that mentality, that culture is rolled around in everything we do. And that ability to serve the customer in whatever they're doing is what's gave us the ability to grow. So I mean, like when they reach out to us, they know they're gonna have a friendly face. I've done a lot of reading on the Zappos style and the LL Bean, like even Chick-fil-A and different things of how they have a culture of hospitality, how they have a culture of your pleasure, how they have just a culture of serving a customer, and that serving of the customer brings back repeat business and new business and, garners you a reputation that, you really can't buy. I mean, you can buy ads, you can put, you can do PPC now, you could do, commercials or whatever in that, but that's not, not going to buy you or get you lifetime customers.
Totally. I mean, you speak to sort of how difficult it is to stand out in these days because the barrier of entry is so low. Anyone can sort of whip up a business, throw up a website. It's not sort of how it was when sort of your dad started the business back in the 70s and the 80s. It's pretty easy now, but what's really, really hard to replicate is a brand. And checked out your Google ratings and reviews. I mean, I think you guys have like nearly 100 5-star reviews. I mean, those things don't come easy and are really, really hard to build. So sort of kudos to you and sort of your level of intentionality and making sure that you guys put the brand the right way.
I like how you mentioned brand. I mean, you go back. So in my days of the sign business, we didn't have a brand, back in the, the 80s and the 90s. I mean, the only brand was, my dad was just, Verdi Sales and Rentals. We had his color he chose was a, black and yellow sticker. And, the containers were all different colors. There was no continuity. They didn't look the same. And I was really, working on, doing lettering and doing logos and doing stuff for, anything from a roofer to a contractor to whatever general business you would have. And I'd realized that like, hey, I'm, a guy's coming in with a pickup and, I'm working on his logo and giving him artwork for his business card and his flyer, making a set of magnets for his door. He's getting t-shirts printed. And like, I'm taking this one man, truck or whatever, handyman service and making them look like a brand. And yet we're not doing it for ourselves. And there's kind of the difference of like, there again, my dad's business, and he kind of looked at me like, yeah, sure, and I'm like, no, we need to do this, Dad. Like, we need to do this for ourselves. And, it really wasn't, he was a lot of things, but it really wasn't one of his focal points. So, but he gave me the ability to do that. And let me. I mean, I guess in essence, what I mean, because there again, there's that separation where it's the container business and some of the other stuff was his, and the sign business was mine at the time. So he's like, yeah, you want to work on it, go ahead, And so and we did. We started working on it, and the A that's in front of the A-Verdi was my dad was Anthony. He actually went by Tony, but he was Anthony. And so he had brought that in the 90s because the only way of our advertising at the time was Yellow Pages. I mean. All the way through the 90s, and actually I had taken that over from my dad in the 90s when I started doing the lettering for the, the container business and that. And, we were buying ads in different phone books. We were buying bigger ads. I was dealing with the 6 different salespeople for the different Yellow Pages. And that's where the A kind of, was in the Yellow Pages just for us to get first. and we, the A dash got us ahead of everybody else or whatever. My dad was always tired of being called last to the lunch line. So he's like, throw an A in front of it and we get it. And, we didn't know at the time, but like when we started working on a logo, we're like, hey, we'll leave it in it. We'll have that be our business name and our identity. And, the brand was kind of born in the, the end of the 90s there. We kind of started sticking with it and started lettering the trucks and started lettering containers. And we realized how important it was to have a consistent, image. And that's another thing that we work on tremendously now. I mean, the trucks all look good. The containers all look good. They all have the same logo. They all have, you can line up 10 containers and they got the same lettering on it. It's the same size, the same place, same color. And we spend a lot of time and effort in, making sure that looks good. And, they all look, the same and they look consistent. So if somebody sees it, they know it's ours.
Well, that's an awesome story. I hadn't realized that the A was for Anthony and it was just to get in front of the yellow pages. I couldn't tell you where to find the yellow page. I remember they used to drop them off in front of my house and wrap them in plastic and they'd be massive. We'd sit on them as booster seats when we were children to hunker up to the table. I'm sure anyone under 25 has absolutely no idea what we're talking about during this portion of the programming, but it was a really big deal. That's an awesome story. And I think the unique piece that I want to make sure we hit on just before we go into sort of our rapid fire round is because you'd had the experience outside of containers in the lettering business, in signage and building brands and providing and imparting some of that value on the other people was sort of able enable you to come into the container business and say, no, we really need to lean into the brand portion of this and set these things apart. And it sounds like that's been a through line and kept up with you guys. I'd say sort of comparatively, not nearly at the same level of scale. When I was in college, I had a t-shirt business. So we were t-shirt printers. The company was called Artificials back in 2009, but everything we did was brand first and brand awareness. So every organization and every company that I've built, I've always thought about, well, how does the name look on a shirt? How does it look on a hat? So we've tried to be really, really intentional about our logo, about our brand. And I think having the unique backgrounds and coming from different places, and then being a bit unique in sort of the way you come up and sort of your background gives you definitely a competitive advantage and edge. So kudos to you. Definitely see sort of the level of detail that you guys put into your brand and your containers. If there is a single piece or the best piece of advice you'd give someone starting their rental business today, what would it be?
There's too many things to have a single piece. You got to narrow that down to a segment or something or whatever.
Let's say this.
And then we're coming off of our brand conversation. So now I'm going to tell you, like, top of mind awareness here. It's got to be brand.
Got to be brand. Well, I think that's unique.
You got to pick your name. Huh?
No, I think that's unique. I think you guys, if Joe Verdi's answer to that question was the brand question, it would make all the sense in the world because you guys have done a good job of building it.
Well, the other side of it is, along with the brand, is the sales and marketing. I mean, there again, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business. So, I live and breathe that. I mean, that's I kind of joke about it. That's my hobby and that. So, I mean, it's, you can't have a business without a good sales and marketing side of it and, stuff coming at you.
Totally. And I think your brand is your customer service. That is also a part of the brand in addition to the A-Verdi and the signage and the yellow and the font, the whole deal, I think comes together. Awesome. Makes a ton of sense. I know there's no amount of money I could give you to tell me how big you guys are, but let's just say you've grown the business. You've done really, really well from the first container showing up in upstate New York when you were one to you taking over the business in 2002 to where you guys are today. Suffice to say, at least more than a half a dozen employees. What's next for A-Verdi? You totally could just say, hey, I built a pretty successful business. We don't have to do anything else. Let's just kind of ride it out into the sunset, maybe hand it over to one of my children. But you don't seem to operate that way. It doesn't seem like it's ever sort of been in your blood. So where do you see as A-Verdi going and what's next for you 5-10 years?
So I'm not a farmer by, my mindset or whatever. And like I said, I was a year old when my grandpa passed away. But, the kind of like, the farming mindset is kind of how I look at the business side of stuff or whatever. And like you mentioned, you are business is successful, you could just, walk away, or you could just chill and put it on cruise control or whatever it might be. And that's not my mentality at all. That's not my mindset. It's, kind of like, we're up here in, the Finger Lakes area, and you got a lot of vineyards and a lot of apple orchards and that, same kind of concept. I mean, you got an apple orchard, it's producing apples, everything's good. You could just, chill with it, let it kind of roll. Not my style, not my, it's, I want to have the best and the most efficient, use of everything that we're doing. So whenever we're looking at stuff, I'm always trying to figure out how to refine it, how to make it better, how to, make it nicer, and, in whatever part of our business operation we're doing.
Luck versus hard work. Because I'm sure some people inevitably will see this and say, wow, come on, Joe was born into the business. He got lucky. And I'm sure there's a side of you that people will never see, that there was a tremendous amount of hard work. How do you sort of measure those two, and how would you attribute your success between luck versus hard work?
So it's a combination. We actually, when we're doing interviews, we ask if, one of the questions we ask is, are you lucky? And it's amazing the different responses that you get. I mean, some people are just like, oh, I'm not lucky. I never win the lotto, My best response, or the response I like from my buddy, is that, they're blessed. And that's how I feel. Like, it's a blessing. I mean, we're blessed every day to get up, throw our 2 feet on the floor, and be able to walk, So I agree that things are lucky, but I also, it's what you make out of it. It's, we've all got 24 hours in a day. We've all got, fresh air. We've all got, wherever we live, whatever, resources we have around us or in front of us. So I think it's having a positive attitude, having a good mindset about that, and then putting your nose to the grindstone and working. Now, there is some turning points, as far as, like you say, lucky, like, hey, you were born in the right spot, you happen to be at the port in, 1978 and found a container, and, you might have, been an opportunity to, buy something, do something, see something. But then again, you also got to, put the hard work in, or you got to take advantage and take that risk that goes along with that. It's not just, that you won and scratched off the lotto ticket and won it. It's, you were there, you saw it, you embraced it, you believed it, and then you stood behind it and ran with it.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I asked that question to a lot of people. I think you're the first person who's attributed some of it to luck, but I completely agree. I think your hard work puts you in positions to be lucky and for things to sort of fall into your lap. But it's the dedication, it's the hard work that sort of positions you to take advantage of the success when it does come your way. So no one more successful than Joe of A-Verdi. Joe, I appreciate it. It's been an awesome conversation. Truly, truly appreciate you being transparent and open about how you built the brand, how you built the business. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, Donald. It was great. Great hanging out with you for a while here.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you.